Metroid is a series with many memorable traits, which is one of the reasons why it's so dearly loved. Its strength in viable backtracking, detailed environments which tell their own story, it's catered for multiple traditions which the majority of the titles are true to. Even when the games have differed in their own ways over the years, almost all of the titles have these elements strongly bound to them. But probably the thing which is most reminiscent about the Metroid games is the atmosphere. In many games, atmosphere can often be the biggest selling factor. Like with Dark Souls, how insignificant you feel to the world you traverse, how small you truly feel, or how truly oppressive the atmosphere feels within Silent Hill 2, the oppression and claustrophobia from the fog of the town. So let's take one of Metroid's most defining feelings of atmosphere: isolation. Metroid has a constant feeling of solitude. Its atmosphere of loneliness, seclusion, the sense of how truly alone you are in this world you explore. Any problems and obstacles you face, you have to stand up to by yourself. Alone. And with anything you accomplish or overcome, it's almost always only you who witnessed it as you play. This feeling the series stirs, while unique to each title, is still very reminiscent in the majority of the games. The same way you lonesomely travel through the depths of Brinstar is very much like the way you explore the caves of the Phandrana Drifts. While completely different formats, the atmosphere is still very much there, and gives you quite a similar feeling. How you explore the world entirely on your own, and figure out which way is the right way to go, really makes you realize you have no help in this setting. Nobody else is going to show you the way. Even with occasional directions on where you should be going, it's still on your shoulders to figure out how, considering it's almost never as simple as point A to point B. It really is all on you to figure out. The constant calculations and questions you ask yourself as you play the game, in retrospect, are what Samus herself is really thinking. Constantly asking, how do I get there? Where haven't I looked? The way you rely on your own wits to find the right path in this foreign land is truly what makes the feeling of solitude really sink in. In this world, it's up to you, and only you. This exact atmosphere isn't in every single game, however, or at least in its full extent, such as Fusion, Other M, and partially Prime 3. However, the feeling of isolation isn't the only type of atmosphere we find in the Metroid games. Let's take a look at another one strongly implemented: dread. Let's take Prime 2 Echoes, probably my favourite installment in the series. We still have that feeling of isolation. In fact, it's just as viable as the rest of the series, even with an ally in the game with us. Though the one ally you have, Umos, can never leave his temple, it's still you who must traverse the planet Aether, still you who has to stand up to everything. Though Prime 2 introduces a new feeling to the franchise, at least in a much more developed effect than we've seen: dread. This feeling is located within what is called the Dark World. Dark Aether. This world is a land of poisonous atmosphere, far more dangerous and menacing creatures, and haunting, echoing music. These areas are reminiscent of the ones you travelled through on Aether. However, they feel torn, possessed, and very dangerous. This is the place you truly dread going. Every time you pass into the portal, you know you are entering much more dangerous terrain. Exploring Dark Aether feels much more treacherous. With every door you open, you feel a need to push yourself to go through it. You're constantly on your guard, as you're passing through an environment which is much less forgiving than you've previously traversed. Not only does the dangerous terrain add to the effect, but with the environmental details as well. The fallen Luminoth, the space pirates struggle against the Ying. There is plot built in to make you feel the true ambience the Dark World has in this game. The ambience of it not just being against you, but the entire environment as a whole. Its grip over the Luminoth, and over Aether itself. It's something far bigger than you, and has claimed many others who have tried to traverse it in the past. The dread works in with the isolation and solitude to create a very strong feeling every single time you enter this dimension. Every time you return back to Aether, you feel a sense of relief, returning to a safer place. You feel at ease, at least for the time being. There are other types of atmosphere built around a similar formula in the series. One which is quite strong in another title: Fusion, Fear. Metroid Fusion is one of the more straightforward games in the series. You're often told where to go and why you're going there. Though a large portion of Fusion is pretty frightening to say. While Metroid games are commonly suspenseful, not many of the games you could really describe as frightening. The main enemies of Fusion, the Parasite X, are pretty intimidating alone. How they possess creatures and take their form, even your past enemies. The environments you pass through on the BSL station can often give you chills. Foes you encounter, such as the Nightmare, have genuinely creepy elements. but the core reason for its atmosphere is the SAX, Samus Aran X. This creature, which holds all your strongest abilities, is something that hunts you, in the form of you at your strongest point. It holds your suit while you are in a vulnerable state. You move through the corridors cautiously, in hope that you will not encounter this ferocious creature that so calmly stalks you. For a Game Boy game, this adds some serious tension. Whenever you hear those footsteps against the metal floor, something hits you mentally, because you know what they belong to. This feeling was also replicated in a similar way in Metroid Prime 3 on the GFS Valhalla. The remains of this space frigate are from a space pirate massacre. A massacre of a setting you know, or one you've seen before at least. Having explored the GFS Olympus at the beginning, you know many of the areas, and the setting feels familiar, but somewhat like Dark Aether to Aether, it feels twisted and broken. With the swarms of Metroids and the dark secrets within the frigate, you never really feel safe on this ship. Now for one feeling quite different to the ones listed prior, here's one which is to a much more positive effect: discovery. When playing Metroid, you see as much of the world and story as you decide to explore. In many cases, the lore and much of the plot within the game is found through your own involvement in discovering it. Environmental details and logs of data contribute to this factor. As you play, you learn more about the environment and world you traverse. You pick up on things and feel a new sense of accomplishment when you do, not because the story directly told you, but because you now know it on your own involvement. From you seeking it out, you uncovered it. You learnt it by your own merits. The same way you piece together the previous events of an area, say in Torian or the BSL station from Fusion, is much like how you put together the tragic past of the Luminoth from scans and locations. Like finding a hidden item in many games, you feel like you achieved something that you weren't going to find by the game's mandatory placement. It's the same case with Metroid, but on a far bigger scale. You know as much of this foreign world you've arrived on as you've explored of it. A large part of the plot becomes its own collection of bits of information you found, and how much you've explored is how much you know about it. The more you explore into the world, the more you scan, the closer you look, the more you uncover and learn. And it's all from your personal involvement as the player.